Great to be here in San Francisco, such a beautiful city. And so I'm going to be looking at European production outlook. I know I've got an audience here. I think I've also got an audience live streaming. I think my kids might be watching back in England where it's in the evening. So my message to them is you should be doing your homework rather than watching me. So let's have a look at what's happening across the other side of the Atlantic. Just a little bit on world potato markets. As Kevin said, a weekly analysis of the potato market around the world, focusing on European prices, but also trade and production across the world. And please come and see me if you would like to have any sample copies. So let's just look at where we are now, where we were last year. There's been a long-term trend, you see here, a long-term trend of declining area and of potatoes across the EU being the 28 countries of the European Union, ranging from Ireland in the west right through to Poland in the east. But that production has also been declining along with hectares and area, but not quite to the same extent. And the production in 2016 was down on what was expected, but still reasonably low in historic terms. There's 5 key areas, countries within the EU that produce the majority, over half the European Union's potatoes. That's Belgium, France, Germany, Netherlands, and the United Kingdom, all in a block in the sort of north and west of Europe. And for them, 2016 was quite a difficult year. There was a period of dry weather at the key time when the potatoes were growing and yields were low, and so production was low. Just comparing that with North American potato production, that was reasonably good in 2016 and stable at around about 23 million tonnes. Excuse my doing everything in tonnes rather than hundredweight, but our standard is to do things in tonnes. Just looking at the prices of potatoes, you can see that the price here, this is the average price of European processing potatoes, and near sort of all-time highs this year because of the lack of production in those 5 key countries. And then you compare that, and these are figures from North America Potato Marketing News. I don't know if Bruce is here, but thanks for those. And just to compare, so the average EU price at the moment, the EU5, is around about nearly $11 a pound, compared with nearly $5 a pound in the USA. But you can see there's much more volatility in prices in the EU than there is in America, and so between the highest and the lowest prices, there's a 14 times difference in the EU, and only 4.5 times the difference between the highest and the lowest, or the lowest and the highest in North America or the US. So just looking, those really were free buy prices, but let's look at the contract prices. There's been quite a change in the last few years to much more being bought on contract in the EU than on free buy. Historically, a lot of stuff was bought on free buy, and this is just the Belgian figures here, and these are Belgapom figures, and Roman Kool's from Belgapom is here as well, so he'll correct me if they're right. Are they right? Are they okay? Yeah, thanks, Roman. And so around about 65% now, 2/3 of production across the EU5 for processing is now sold on contracts rather than free buy. So a lot of the farmers are not enjoying, well, to a certain extent they're enjoying some of the higher free buy prices, but that's not the total picture for them, and the contract price is much lower, less than half the free buy price. But in previous years, it's been way down until, and at some years around about 20 euros per tonne, compared to the 250 euros per tonne that we see this year. So that massive difference in prices there. I was asked to just look at some of the pricing trends and consumption trends across Europe, and just looking here at retail prices for potatoes in France. You can see there has been a steady increase from around about 30 cents US cents per pound up to around about 45 now. So a considerable sort of 50% increase in the last couple of years. And encouragingly, consumption has not decreased that much. It's gone down a little bit, but encouragingly, consumers still seem to be able to be prepared to pay for those higher prices, which is obviously good news. Average British or UK product prices, you've seen a bit of an increase in the price of fries, and but a decrease in the price of D-high. So again, consumption seems to be holding steady. It's over the last 40 years, the consumption of potatoes in the UK has declined by about 50%. But in the last 2 or 3 years, it does seem to have sort of bottomed out and holding steady, and some slight growth in some markets, but not substantial growth. Just looking at the trend for frozen fry exports, and you can see how the EU has become a massive player on the world market. This is the exports of so less than 400,000 tonnes back 10 years ago, and now way up to about 1.3 million tonnes. This is just exports out of EU exports outside the EU, so really competing in the markets that you're competing here, both in the US and Canada. You can see there's been quite an increase there again in the US, and the Canadian level has sort of held steady, and a lot of that, about sort of 80% of that volume from Canada goes into the US. So that's a big market there. Some increase there we saw that with Argentina, and Steve was talking about that earlier, a little uptick in Argentina, and then New Zealand, Egypt sort of holding steady as well. There are some new players on the block. I'd look out for Turkey, that seems to be increasing, and even somewhere like China is actually starting to, and India starting to export from a very, very small base. I'm not going to read out all this. This is all in your it'll be on the slides and whatever that you can look at your own leisure. But just looking at some of the markets that are there, and you can see that there's still some really big, US, France, United Kingdom, Netherlands, still the big markets, but actually some of the real big growth has been in places like Brazil, Saudi Arabia, and China, Australia, South Korea. Some of those markets have really been growing. Places like Belgium and Netherlands, there is an element of moving product between the countries, so you can see some of those ones, and we've just got a list of the main suppliers in those markets. So echoing what Steve was saying, some of those main markets are outside the conventional European and North American markets. Price, looking at just a quick one on prices of fry exports, and you can see there that the price advantage of both the Netherlands and Belgium, in particular Belgium, has a real price advantage over the US and in Canada, although Canada is in the mix and similar to the Netherlands in its export prices. This is looking at Belgian processing. You can see how that has increased and looking at processing around about 4.5 million tons of potatoes in the next 3 years, and that's their exports reflect that increase. But someone like Belgium is probably getting to almost sort of peak potato. There's only about sort of 10%, perhaps more potential to increase, but it's looking at other countries, including France, on its doorstep, to be producing the potatoes that it can process. So still plenty of growth there. Just looking at local and fresh, that's exports of fresh potatoes are fairly local and fairly stable. I'll whiz through that one. Seed exports, that's really the Dutch. I know we've got some good Dutch seed exporters here. Dutch dominate that, and that's really little change there has been on that over the last few years. And the dehy trade, what Drew was talking about there, again, it's the EU is capturing a big part of that market, and as Drew's saying, that there are a lot of opportunities there for North American dehy processors. I was also just asked to look at the UK market. So consumption of potatoes is in the last 5 years is down 15%, or the 15% 2014. The real only area of significant growth is in chilled potatoes. And there's a shift to smaller packs. That's very much the same probably here and across in Europe as well, and the shift to convenience as well. So nearly 2/3 of shoppers will shop more than 3 times a week, and internet shopping is very popular in the UK. Just some of the increases there. That's an encouraging one, that there is been 11% increase in potato servings in the last year. Outside of home, and nearly 1/3 of meals are eaten outside the home in the UK. Just on varieties, there are more than 175, but probably only half a dozen that really make up the majority of consumption. That seems to be in a lot of markets. How many new varieties there are, there's still some traditional old favourites. Just looking at some of the trends here, there's a focus on innovation and value rather than volume for market growth in the UK. So things like here with the potatoes with the chorizos inside this, very, very posh potatoes here. This is actually Dutchy Organics, which is the food brand of Prince Charles. He has his own food brands, which is not surprisingly organic. McCain's have had great success with their baby baked potatoes, and this one here, Hip Chips, is a new shop or restaurant in the middle of London in Soho that only sells chips, or as we call them in England, crisps. This seems to be the sort of trend. There was another restaurant just selling breakfast cereals, so very high value, but very little volume. And I've just put Leaf up there. Kevin said that I'm a trustee of Leaf, and that's an organisation that looks at improving the environment and the way farmers use and their inputs and produce. And there's more of a focus on the environmental element of food, and people are looking for that across the UK. Just looking at the massive issue that is Brexit, and I will be talking about this a bit later on, and Guy, who's here as well, will be looking at the world market, and I'll be looking at Brexit. But the UK is one of the world's largest potato markets. It imports the equivalent of nearly 2 million tons of potatoes every year, and has a trade deficit of more than $500 million. So there might be potential there for people both in Europe and North America. So just looking at some of the potato takeaways, I like to call them, just some in conclusion. So in contrast to the North America, European supplies are tighter this year, and the price is higher, but there's still a very weak euro compared to the dollar. So EU exporters are still very competitive. There are expansion issues in some parts of the EU. Netherlands has really reached peak potato. Belgium is getting that way. And what you're seeing is consolidation in a lot of countries where there is a larger area, smaller area, but higher yields and perhaps more professional growers rather than people growing it for their own consumption. I think UK market drivers and across a lot of Europe are fairly similar to those in North America, a mature market where the potential to increase consumption is not so great. Just on Brexit, I think, will be some opportunities in the UK market there. And just finally, just really to highlight, and some of the things that I know Steve was talking about there earlier, that the real potential is outside Europe and North America, the real potential in terms of growing markets. And in particular, you see somewhere like Africa, in the next sort of 30, 35 years, its population set to double, an increase of a third in the population of Asia, and whereas somewhere like Europe, the population is not really expected to increase at all. And combine that with actually people eating less, and that really does seem to be a trend. That seems to be a trend both here and in Europe, that people are eating less, and that will combine to show that most of the growth of the potato industry is really going to be outside those two big conventional markets of Europe and North America. Right, there we go. Just a whiz through the European potato market. I'm going to be on the stand 8 o'clock tomorrow morning, nice bright and early. So if you'd like to come and have a chat to me, then please do. And I'll be around the expo for the next 2 or 3 days. Many thanks.